December settles over the Western Front with a deceptive stillness. Snow lies across roads and fields, muting sound and narrowing movement. The Allied advance has slowed, not from resistance alone, but from distance. Supply lines stretch thin across France, and momentum gives way to routine. The assumption within headquarters is not of danger, but of delay. Omar Bradley reviews reports with the discipline of habit. His command spans wide ground, and the rhythm of operations has become predictable. German forces continue to fall back. Contact is frequent but limited. The enemy appears exhausted, short of fuel, short of men, short of options. The war, though not finished, feels controlled. Bradley's desk fills with summaries rather than alarms. Intelligence assessments speak of German shortages and defensive postures. The Ardennes sector, quiet and wooded, remains lightly held. It is treated as terrain that absorbs pressure rather than generates it. Decisions elsewhere take precedence. Among the documents that pass through his hands are procurement summaries captured weeks earlier, German paperwork, dry and technical, cataloging weapons distribution. At first glance, they offer nothing urgent. Rifles, ammunition, anti-tank weapons, all listed without context. The numbers seem inflated, disconnected from the reality. Bradley believes he understands. He pauses over one line longer than expected. The method of distribution is unusual. Weapons ordered in bulk, routed through civilian channels, delivered directly to units with minimal oversight. The rifles are simple, cheaply produced, designed for rapid issue rather than longevity. They are not meant for elite formations. They are meant for anyone who can hold them. Bradley sets the paper aside, then draws it back. The implication is not tactical at first. It is logistical. The Germans, assumed incapable of equipping new forces, are doing exactly that, bypassing conventional bottlenecks. The weapons are not sophisticated, but they are functional. They do not signal quality. They signal intent. He asks for clarification. The response is precise. These rifles require minimal training. They are paired with simple anti-tank weapons, issued in quantity. The distribution bypasses standard depots. Orders are placed, filled, and delivered rapidly. It is not efficient in peacetime terms. It is efficient in desperation. Bradley considers a terrain where these weapons would matter least and most. Open ground favors armor and air power. Forests and villages favor men with rifles who can wait. The Ardennes fits the second description. He does not speak immediately. The room continues around him. Staff officers moving maps and discussing routine adjustments. Bradley studies the document again, this time not as inventory, but as indicator. If the enemy is equipping large numbers of minimally trained troops, then they are not preparing to hold ground indefinitely. They are preparing to flood it. Quantity over refinement. Presence over endurance. He requests updated reports from forward units. Patrol contacts have increased slightly, nothing alarming on their own. Small groups encountered where none were expected. Rifle fire from concealed positions. Resistance that delays rather than defends. Bradley listens without interrupting. The pattern forms slowly. Not a line, but a texture. The kind of resistance that does not seek victory, only time and confusion. He thinks back to earlier assumptions. That the Germans lack the capacity to assemble new formations. That fuel shortages alone prevent movement. That air superiority guarantees early warning. Each assumption holds individually. Together, they leave space for a different approach. The rifles on the page are not decisive weapons. They are instruments of mass. Their value lies not in stopping tanks, but in fixing units in place, forcing deployment, consuming attention. Combined with terrain and weather, they change the equation. Bradley remains silent longer than usual. He considers what such weapons enable. They allow an enemy to reappear where he was presumed absent. They allow an attack to absorb losses without collapse. They allow time for heavier forces to move behind a screen of expendable resistance. The silence in the room stretches. Staff officers wait for instruction that does not come. Bradley's focus narrows, not to a single report, but to the connection between them. He looks again at the date on the document. The orders were placed weeks ago. Production would have taken time. Distribution even more. Whatever these weapons support is already in motion. Bradley sets the paper down carefully. The conflict, as he has understood it, shifts slightly, not enough to declare a crisis, enough to demand attention. The Ardennes no longer reads as empty space. It reads as opportunity, not for defense, but for concealment. He asks for terrain overlays, road networks, villages, forest density. The maps change beneath his hands, revealing corridors that had seemed irrelevant days earlier. No one in the room speaks of offensives. No one needs to. The implication exists without language. An enemy who equips widely and cheaply is not conserving strength. He is preparing to spend it. Bradley's silence is not hesitation. It is calculation. Outside, snow continues to fall, thickening the cover across the forest. Units along the line adjust positions against the cold, unaware of the weight shifting above them. The rifles move toward their destinations, unremarkable in isolation, decisive in accumulation. Bradley finally looks up. The pressure does not yet arrive, but it announces itself quietly, through paperwork rather than artillery. The realization settles without urgency, but without comfort. Something is coming that will not look like what the Allies expect. Bradley does not issue an alert. He issues questions. Requests move outward for confirmation rather than reaction. He asks for shipping records to be cross-checked with rail activity east of the Ardennes. He asks whether captured weapons of similar type have appeared in recent engagements. The answers arrive slowly, filtered through layers that have not yet adjusted their focus. The rifles begin to appear in after-action reports without emphasis. Infantry patrols encounter German soldiers carrying unfamiliar but functional weapons. They are lighter, simpler, lacking the finish of standard issue. No one flags them as significant. They fire. They kill. They are logged and forgotten. Bradley does not forget them. He notices that these encounters share a pattern. The Germans do not press. They hold briefly, then withdraw. They do not seek decisive engagement. They seek delay. Each contact costs time, ammunition, and attention. Each forces American units to deploy more strength than the resistance warrants. Weather compounds the effect. Snow reduces visibility. Fog limits observation. Air reconnaissance reports gaps where clarity is needed most. The forest absorbs movement. Roads carry traffic that cannot be easily tracked. The Ardennes becomes quiet again, but it is no longer empty. Bradley raises the issue during a coordination meeting. He does not frame it as alarm. He frames it as inconsistency. German behavior does not match presumed weakness. Units assumed incapable of coordinated action are acting with purpose, even if that purpose is limited. Some officers attribute it to local initiative. Others point to desperation. No one argues that it signals an offensive. The idea remains improbable. The Germans, it is said, lack the fuel. They lack the air cover. They lack the freedom of movement. Bradley listens, then asks a simple question. If the Germans cannot sustain an offensive, why equip large numbers of men cheaply and quickly? The room quiets briefly. No answer satisfies the logic fully. The rifles suggest preparation, not improvisation. Preparation implies intent. Intent requires opportunity. The Ardennes offers concealment. Winter offers cover from air power. Civilian distribution channels offer speed where military ones fail. Bradley does not challenge consensus directly. He understands its inertia. Instead, he expands the frame. He asks for contingency planning that does not assume enemy exhaustion as a given. He asks for assessments that consider risk rather than probability. The responses remain measured. Adjustments are proposed at the margins. Additional patrols. Reinforced observation posts. Minor redeployments. No one speaks of shifting reserves or rebalancing the front. The war has rewarded forward pressure too consistently to abandon it easily. Bradley accepts the limits of the moment. He cannot force clarity where evidence remains incomplete, but he can prepare his own understanding. He continues to track the rifles, treating them as indicators rather than curiosities. As days pass, rail activity east of the Ardennes increases. Trains move at night. Some are intercepted by air attacks when weather allows, but many pass unseen. The loads are varied. Fuel appears in quantities that suggest hoarding. Ammunition stocks grow. The pattern is uneven but persistent. Bradley studies these developments alongside weather forecasts. Winter storms approach. Days shorten further. Air operations will be restricted. The conditions that constrain Allied strength also constrain observation. Surprise becomes more plausible with each forecast. Reports from forward units continue to describe small-scale resistance that does not escalate. German soldiers fight briefly, then disengage. They do not defend ground stubbornly. They occupy it long enough to be felt. The rifles show up again. Capture examples are examined. They are crude but reliable. Their simplicity explains their speed of production. They do not require skilled labor or extended training. Anyone can use them. Bradley considers what such weapons enable in mass. They allow the Germans to generate presence without quality. They allow formations to exist that would otherwise be impossible. They are not meant to win firefights. They are meant to fill space. The realization sharpens. An enemy who fills Space Force's response. He draws attention. He masks movement elsewhere. The rifles are not the spear. They are the screen. Bradley begins to connect this with intelligence gaps further east. Reports of armored units repositioning. Radio silence in sectors once active. Sudden shortages of fuel that are later corrected. Each element alone is explainable. Together, they suggest orchestration. He orders a quiet review of reserve placement, not movement. Review. He wants to know how quickly units could shift if required, how roads would support such movement under winter conditions. The exercise remains internal, framed as routine readiness. The pressure builds not through action, but through accumulation. Bradley feels it tightening, though nothing yet forces his hand. The front holds. Casualties remain within expectation. No breakthrough occurs. Then, late one evening, a consolidated report arrives from multiple sectors along the Ardennes. German contacts increase simultaneously across a wider frontage. Still limited, still probing, but coordinated. Bradley reads the summary twice. The rifles are not mentioned explicitly. They do not need to be. Their presence is embedded in the pattern. The enemy is not conserving manpower. He is spending it to buy time. Bradley understands what that time is for. He remains silent, but the silence now carries weight. The assumptions that govern the quiet front begin to erode. The Ardennes no longer feels like a buffer. It feels like a curtain. Behind it, something is forming. The pressure does not yet break, but it presses close enough to be felt, and it is no longer abstract. Bradley moves from observation to alignment. He does not issue a warning framed as prediction. He adjusts posture without language that invites resistance. The rifles, the probes, the rail traffic, the weather forecasts are treated as variables in a single equation whose solution remains undefined but dangerous. He requests updated readiness reports from units along the Ardennes, not strength alone but fatigue, ammunition status, and winter equipment. The responses reveal uneven preparation. Some formations are arrested. Others are stretched thin, rotated into the sector precisely because it was considered quiet. The logic of economy of force has created exposure. Bradley studies the reserve structure. He notes how far mobile units sit from the forested front. He measures response time in hours rather than days. He understands that distance under winter conditions compounds delay. Roads that look adequate on maps narrow quickly under snow and traffic. He raises the issue again at a higher coordination level. This time, he does not lead with weapons or intelligence fragments. He leads with consequence. If the enemy strikes through the Ardennes, containment will depend on speed of response, not initial strength. The question is not whether the sector can hold indefinitely, but whether it can hold long enough. Some agree, others remain unconvinced. The enemy's limitations are restated. Fuel shortages, air superiority, the improbability of a large-scale armored thrust through poor terrain. Bradley does not argue these points. He accepts them, then asks whether improbability justifies unpreparedness. The discussion ends without resolution. No dramatic shift occurs, but the tone changes. Contingency becomes acceptable language. Bradley continues to track the rifles. Captured weapons are now common enough to establish distribution patterns. They appear across multiple units, issued consistently rather than sporadically. This is not scavenging. It is supply. He notices another detail. German soldiers equipped with these rifles often carry minimal additional gear. They are not prepared for prolonged combat. They are prepared for movement. Their role is temporary by design. Bradley interprets this as evidence of a layered approach. Forward elements absorb attention and force deployment. Heavier forces follow undercover. The tactic reduces exposure during the most vulnerable phase of movement. Weather forecasts worsen. A prolonged period of cloud cover and snow is expected. Air operations will be severely limited. Bradley understands what that removes from the equation. Early warning, interdiction, rapid response. He quietly authorizes increased reconnaissance by ground patrols, knowing their range is limited. He requests additional signals monitoring, knowing silence may be intentional. Each measure adds detail but not certainty. The pressure intensifies when reports indicate German armored units closer to the front than previously assessed. Their exact positions remain unclear. The forest conceals them effectively. The question shifts from whether armor exists to how much. Bradley returns to the rifles with renewed focus. Cheap weapons in large numbers suggest acceptance of loss. Acceptance of loss implies urgency. Urgency implies deadline. Whatever the Germans intend, they intend it soon. He considers timing. The year's end approaches. Allied command structures anticipate a winter lull. If the enemy seeks to disrupt that assumption, the moment is optimal. Surprise compounds existing strain. Bradley prepares briefing notes that emphasize vulnerability rather than speculation. He highlights terrain, weather, and reserve distance. He avoids language that implies certainty. He frames risk as asymmetrical, low probability, high consequence. The response is cautious but attentive. Adjustments are discussed. Minor redeployments considered. Still, no decisive shift occurs. The front remains thin. The forest remains quiet. Bradley feels the weight of incomplete authority. He cannot reorder the entire front on inference alone, but he can sharpen awareness. He ensures that command channels remain open, that response mechanisms are rehearsed mentally if not physically. Late on one of the final days before the break, reports arrive of German activity escalating across multiple sectors at once. Not attacks, preparations, increased movement at night, engineers improving roads under cover weather, fuel dumps concealed in villages. Bradley reviews the information in sequence. The rifles now fit cleanly into the picture. They were never meant to win ground. They were meant to hold attention while the real force assembled. He falls silent, not from surprise, but from confirmation. The realization is complete enough to change posture, but not enough to dictate outcome. The enemy has prepared carefully. The Allies have not been blind, but they have been constrained by expectation. Bradley understands what comes next. When the attack begins, it will not announce itself gradually. It will arrive with force where the line is weakest, under conditions that deny early correction. He prepares to respond not to the opening blow, but to its consequences. That is where command will matter most. The force remains still, but no longer neutral. It has become a reservoir of intent. Bradley waits, knowing the silence will not last. The break comes before dawn, without warning that can be acted upon. Artillery fire cuts through the forest in overlapping waves, heavy and sustained. Communications falter almost immediately. Forward units report contact, then lose signal. Roads clog as movement accelerates in conflicting directions. The Ardennes, long treated as quiet depth, becomes a center of gravity in minutes. Bradley receives the first reports in fragments. Initial estimates underestimate scale. Some describe localized attacks. Others mention armor, where none was expected. The pattern clarifies only as messages accumulate. This is not probing. It is commitment. The rifle units appear first. German infantry pushes through the trees, advancing in numbers that defy prior assumptions. They do not maneuver for elegance. They move to occupy space, to fix defenders in place, to force engagement. Losses are accepted without pause. Their presence forces American units to deploy reserves meant for later contingencies. Bradley recognizes the function immediately. The mail-order rifles have done their work. They have created contact everywhere at once. They deny clarity. They consume time. Behind them, heavier forces move. Reports of armor follow, uneven at first, then consistent. Tanks emerge onto roads cleared and improved under cover of darkness and weather. Engineers bridge obstacles rapidly. Fuel appears where it was assumed absent. The enemy has solved problems the Allies believed unsolvable. Bradley issues directives that prioritize coherence over ground. Units are instructed to hold key road junctions, to delay where necessary, to avoid isolation. Withdrawal is authorized where encirclement threatens. The goal is not to stop the attack outright, but to prevent collapse while response forms. Requests for reinforcement surge. The line bends under pressure. Some units fight stubbornly, buying time at high cost. Others are forced back, leaving gaps that must be sealed quickly. The front loses shape but not function. Bradley coordinates continuously, balancing incomplete information against irreversible decision. He reallocates strength from quieter sectors, aware that each move creates vulnerability elsewhere. He cannot cover every gap. He must choose which failures are survivable. The weather compounds every difficulty. Air power remains grounded. Visibility is limited to the range of small arms in many areas. Artillery fires blind. Movement is slow and dangerous. The conditions favor the attacker only briefly, but that brief window is decisive. Bradley watches the map change hour by hour. The German advance forms a bulge, pressing westward through the forest. It does not yet threaten strategic rupture, but it creates operational crisis. Roads essential for lateral movement fall under enemy pressure. Units lose contact with neighbors. He returns to the initial document in his mind. The rifles were not an afterthought. They were the enabler. Without them, the opening phase would have lacked mass. With them, the enemy achieved saturation. Bradley's silence returns, this time under weight. He does not question the logic that brought him here. He focuses on response. He works to reestablish lines of communication, to restore command where it is fractured. He prioritizes time above all else. As the first day ends, the offensive has not broken the Allied front, but it has shaken it. The Germans hold ground deeper than expected. American losses mount. The cost of surprise becomes visible. Bradley understands that the crisis will not be decided by the opening blow. It will be decided by how quickly the Allies can absorb shock and redirect force. The enemy has spent secrecy and surprise. What remains is endurance. He prepares for coordination beyond his immediate command. The scale of the crisis demands integration. The response will require movement across army boundaries, decisions that reshape the front. The rifles, now scattered across the battlefield, lie broken and abandoned in places. Their purpose is complete. They bought the enemy what he needed most. Time. As night falls again over the Ardennes, the pressure does not ease. It shifts. The opening phase is over. The reckoning phase begins. The second night brings no pause. Fighting continues in fragments, shaped by terrain and exhaustion rather than clean lines. The German advance slows unevenly, not because resistance is hardened everywhere, but because movement has begun to cost more than it gains. Roads choke with damaged vehicles. Fuel shortages emerge at the edges of the thrust. Units advance without clear knowledge of what lies ahead. Bradley works through the hours without ceremony. The crisis has stripped decision-making to essentials. He focuses on restoring coherence where the front is bent, reinforcing shoulders rather than chasing the center of the penetration. His orders emphasize containment. Ground can be traded. Time cannot. Coordination expands beyond routine boundaries. Forces from less pressured sectors are redirected. Command relationships adjust under necessity rather than preference. Bradley accepts friction as unavoidable. Precision is no longer possible. Alignment is. As daylight returns, the weather begins to shift. Breaks in cloud allow limited air activity. Reconnaissance aircraft report columns stalled and exposed. Fighter bombers strike where movement is visible. The effect is not immediate collapse, but cumulative constraint. The enemy's freedom narrows with every hour of daylight. Bradley tracks the change carefully. He does not mistake slowing momentum for failure. He understands that the German offensive, once committed, cannot simply stop. It must either achieve decision or exhaust itself. The task now is to accelerate exhaustion without overextending response. The rifle units that open the offensive fade from prominence. Many are destroyed. Others melt away. Their absence does not weaken the enemy's position immediately, but removes the screen that masked heavier formations. What remains is exposed to air, artillery, and coordinated pressure. Bradley reflects briefly on the sequence of events, not as judgment, but as lesson. The rifles had mattered not because of their firepower, but because of what they enabled. They allowed an attack to exist where it should not have been possible. They turned assumption into vulnerability. Containment solidifies. The front stops bending outward. German advances stall against organized resistance. Counterpressure begins, cautious at first, then steadier. The crisis shifts from rupture to reduction. Losses remain high. Units on both sides fight in brutal conditions, measured in yards rather than miles. Bradley does not frame the outcome as success. He frames it as survival under maximum strain. As days pass, the offensive loses coherence. Supply failures compound. Air attacks intensify. The German gamble reveals its limit. What was gained in surprise is lost in sustainability. Bradley oversees the transition back toward initiative without indulgence. He understands that the cost of the crisis will echo beyond its resolution. Timetables are delayed. Units require rest and refit. The broader campaign absorbs the shock rather than escaping it. Within headquarters, the moment becomes reference rather than triumph. Assumptions about enemy capacity are revised. Intelligence indicators once dismissed gain new weight. The danger of equating weakness with incapacity becomes clear. Bradley does not speak publicly of the rifles again. They have served their purpose as warning and proof. What remains is their implication. Modern war can bend rules when necessity overrides convention. An enemy willing to sacrifice quality for mass can still generate decisive pressure. The Ardennes stabilizes. The Bulge begins to recede. The front regains shape, though not innocence. Winter continues to punish movement, but direction is restored. Bradley looks forward rather than back. The war will continue toward its conclusion, shaped by this moment of recalibration. Leadership under pressure has proven less about foresight than about response when foresight fails. The silence that once surrounded a line of paperwork now belongs to the forest again, but it is no longer mistaken for safety. What fell silent in Bradley was not resolve, but illusion. The impact of a mail-order rifle was never its shot. It was the space it created for everything that followed.